And I'm just going to jump right in. People can join whenever they get in. Oh, hi, Lisa here. So thank you everybody for coming tonight. This is LexCAN's monthly meeting, and thanks to Fran's advocacy, we are presenting voting and voting for the climate as the most important thing we can do this year. And well, we're a nonprofit and we can't actually tell you about voting any particular way. We can tell you about ways to get involved in the voting process to get other people to vote. So we're recording. We will share this recording with people who are on our lists, and then you can share it with future people and keep sending it around. We got 3-4 months to get this work done. So as you all know, our mission and vision is to educate people about climate change and ways in which we can try to avert the worst effects of climate change. And this year's election could not be any more important in staying on a pathway to clean energy. So Fran is going to lead us, and if you have questions during the presentation, you can put them in the chat, and I might interrupt Fran in the middle if it seems like it should be asked at that time. Otherwise, we can take questions at the end. So Fran Ludwig, for I think and hope you all know her if you've been ever to anything having to do with LexCAN or GWAC. Fran she calls herself sort of retired teacher because she still nibbles around the edges of all the school science and big backyard curriculum, but she spends most of her energy working on climate change and advocacy and is the chair of our advocacy committee. So I'm going to turn the evening over to Fran. And like I said, just put your questions in the chat. We're a small enough group, you might be able to raise your hand and we'll see if it's a good timing to interrupt Fran.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And yes, I'm speaking as a member of our advocacy committee, which is very active, and especially so now because of what's happening on Beacon Hill. But tonight we're going to be talking about especially the November election. And as Ricky mentioned, we feel because we are climate advocates, the most important thing that you can do for the planet right now is getting out the vote. And it's not necessarily getting out your own vote. It's getting out votes from people who maybe even are in different states. So we'll hear a little bit more about that. And I just want to bring to your attention what's happening in New York City right now. This is Bill McKibben's third act. And these folks, all 1,000 of them, you don't see all their pictures here, but there were 1,000 people that showed up in front of Citibank, one of the biggest bankrollers of fossil fuel projects. And they identified any number of people who have died from the heat. Now, you know how hot it's been this week. So that really kind of resonates that we have a future that is going to be hotter and hotter. And, you know, that alone should give us a little motivation for trying to do what we can. So we're not advocating for you to go to New York, but there are some things that you can do that will really make a difference on a systemic scale. So it's our contention that voting is the best way to protect the environment. And we're just going with the theme that even one vote can rock the boat, and maybe not just one, but a few thousand votes have been known to make a big difference. And we can turn those votes out by joining some of the groups that we're going to be talking about tonight. So I thought that this statement was really important because this election is not really just a choice between two individuals, as we've been hearing a lot about. It's really a choice between two worldviews. The difference is so stark in the way our candidates would approach the existential crisis of climate change, that it really is something that we need to bring to people's attention. We need to find the people that care about this and get them out to vote. And Michael Mann, who you may know as a pretty well-known climate scientist, says this is the most pivotal election for climate to date. And boy, I really believe that. My anxiety level is way up to here. But one way to address that anxiety is to take action. So again, some reasons for getting out to vote. Number one, we really need a president who is a climate leader, who maintains our connection to the Paris Climate Accord so that we're in conjunction with all the people around the globe, because this is a global issue. We need somebody who is able to appoint climate-friendly federal judges. Just in the last week, we're hearing about some federal judges who have been appointed by a candidate who is not climate friendly, that has made a huge difference. The other aspect is that the president can also suggest people for the Supreme Court, and we've seen how that worked in the previous administration. And we know what has happened as a result. Just a ruling this week, the Chevron ruling, means that the EPA is going to have to depend on federal judges to determine some of the technicalities in regulations. And this is not a really good idea, because federal judges have no training in some of the science or the technology in some of the decisions that they will be making. So we really need to have a president who is a climate leader, who might possibly be able to appoint 3 Supreme Court judges. And you can imagine how that would swing the Supreme Court and promote good climate decisions on their part. And then I hate to think about the option if that doesn't happen. Down the ballot, if people don't turn out to vote, if they throw up their hands and say, I don't like who is up at the top, the people who are down ballot, the people who are running for Senate, the people who are running for the House, also suffer as well. And we know that there's nothing happening in Washington right now because of the obstruction. There's no agreement. So this is a really, really important election for many reasons. So it's interesting that before the debate that happened a week or so ago, this is what likely voters said were most important issues for them. Of course, inflation and increasing costs are right at the top. Immigration and polarization, interestingly enough, was the third biggest issue. But then the other smaller circles, which are all most important, very important, about the same level of interest, and one of them is climate. So that means that people's interest in climate and as a voting issue has really increased over time. And we know that 70% of Americans, including 51% of Republicans, would like the next president to be someone who favors government action to address climate change. 67% of voters believe climate to be a kitchen table issue. So that is really new. And so we're hoping that, and we're going to try to do something about it, to get those voters out and get them to vote for people who will help us in our efforts to address climate change. So I'd like to introduce you to some organizations that can help. And I need to say right up front, and I think Ricky alluded to this, that we are a 501c3 organization. Yay, we finally made it. But what that means is that we cannot take positions on candidates. We can only take positions on issues. And of course, our issue is climate change. So we are advocating tonight for organizations that are nonpartisan. And so, we'll sort of describe those organizations from a nonpartisan point of view, but they're very effective, and they are targeting voters in areas that we think will be amenable to voting with climate in mind. So the first one, and the one that probably has the greatest match for us, is the Environmental Voter Project. And I'd like to get a sense from people on the screen. How many are familiar with the Environmental Voter Project? Anybody? Yes? Yeah? Okay, well, I won't spend too much time on it, except that I'm always floored by some of their statistics, but they said that they identify millions of non-voting environmentalists, and they turn them into consistent voters. So they estimated that over 11 million environmentalists did not vote in 2020, and over 13 million skipped the 2022 midterms. So this is sort of a rich field for approaching voters who don't vote to get them to the polls, and hopefully, vote for candidates that would support their interest in the environment. And the background of this organization is just solid as far as the way they choose people who are environmentalists. And I find that very interesting, but it's quite involved. And you can go to their website and get more details from the head of the organization, who loves numbers. But they definitely are able to identify people who are environmentalists. And so if we look at some of the strategies that they're using, and also the numbers, they're working now in 19 states. They started in Massachusetts, and so they branched out to all of these other states because they've been successful, and they've been able to document that they have turned out a significant number of voters. So they do this by phone calling, by knocking on doors, by sending postcards. They used to do texts. I don't think they do that anymore, but they also use social media as well. And they try to touch these voters, these people who have been identified as environmentalists who don't often vote. They try to touch them at least 3 or 4 times. And they do this over a long period of time. So they will start with their town election and remind them to vote and give them information about voting. And ironically, when they do this, they don't even say anything about the environment. They just give them, where to vote, when to vote, ask people how they're voting. So they give them an idea of, just imagining themselves voting, which has been proven to be successful in getting people to the polls. So they do a lot of research in terms of what actually influences people, even to the point of sending 3 different messages on postcards to 3 different groups of people, and then seeing whether they turn out to vote. And they have numbers, so they can show that it really works. And then their long-term goal is to change the electorate so that those bubbles that we just saw, so that the one for climate will be bigger and bigger, and that the politicians will no longer be able to ignore that issue as they are, deciding on their whether they vote on a certain bill or whatever, so that it will become much more part of the culture, the political culture. And so that's kind of their long-term goal. I think that here in the map, it says you can click on the map when you go to their website, and it will tell you for each of the states how many voters were contacted. So in the state of Georgia, 834,444 environmentally oriented people who don't vote often were contacted, and since 2017. So that's a lot of folks, and they were able to document that they increased the turnout by, I think in 2021, by 0.9 percentage points. Now that doesn't sound like very much, but it could be very significant. And I think if you look at this map, you can see how much how significant the votes were. So in some cases, it's enough to really tip the balance. Okay, here we see Georgia. It said 103,000 environmental voter project targets are now consistently voting. And so they consider them to be super voters. And if you look at the margin of the successful candidates for the Senate, 99,000. So that's even less than the number of people that they turned out as super voters. And the presidential margin in Georgia was 11,779 votes, that famous number. But that is way less than the number of people that they turned out from the Environmental Voter Project. So it really gives you an idea of how successful that is in terms of turning out voters. Now, how do they do it? Well, one is with making phone calls, and they have phone banks that go across the country. They've identified elections. They've already been working pretty hard on primary elections. And of course, most of those are finished, but Arizona is still coming up. The primary election there is July 30th. And I did some phone calling for them last night. And yeah, people need that information about where to vote, when to vote. That there's a vote coming up. I talked to one young man who said, "Oh, November." I said, "No, no, July." So I hope he turns out to vote because he's going to be voting for the person that he will vote for in November. So it really makes a difference. And in terms of the strategies for getting voters out, it used to be that knocking on doors was the most effective. Now that works if you actually talk to somebody, but Ricky and I were talking earlier, and I've been to New Hampshire and knocking on doors, and it took so long to get from one house to another that you really never talk to that many people. And, you'd find people hiding behind their sofa or something when you knocked at the door because they were tired of hearing people. So while it's successful when you actually talk to somebody, time-wise, it takes a lot of time to do that. With the phone calling, again, that personal contact really makes a difference. And you can actually talk to people, some really interesting people, in terms of, telling them about voting and just, hearing a little bit about their life sometime. But it's a very personal kind of thing. The other thing that many groups do, and Environmental Voter Project does this a little bit, is postcarding. We do have a lot of groups in town that do postcarding, and I just want to do a shout out to the Third Act, which has a big postcarding thing every first Sunday, I think, of every month over at Carlton Willard in Bedford. And people sit at a table just like this and do postcarding. And then I think this I snagged from Lisa's Indivisible, but these are people having fun postcarding outside, and it works. Now the turnout, again, it's not huge, but it's enough to tip the balance. Again, you can you can make these postcards personal by writing on them. And I don't know if you can see, but I have some that I'm getting ready to send, which, sorry, came in a packet with all the stamps and everything. And some of the research says that it's really important to make these readable. So they encourage people to print rather than, cursive writing. So I take some of the messages that are constructed by whoever sends out the postcards, whoever gives you the postcards, and I put them on a sticker so I don't have to do so much writing, and it's printed so it's easy to read. But then I put personal, dear so-and-so or hello so-and-so, and then I said, your vote counts, and then I sign my name. So I think people are less likely to toss things in the recycle bin if they see that it's personal, that somebody actually has written something. And I do always try to write in a colored pen so it doesn't look like it's actually printed or something like that. So, so postcarding is another way that you can actually participate. Uh, and then, of course, there's always donations. And if you like me, you get tons of requests for from every politician that's running for anything. And it's just overwhelming. It's really hard to read email. So one of the big features of one of the organizations that I'm going to tell you about next is that you can actually donate without the organization, let's say, knowing it. And it doesn't matter with the Environmental Voter Project because they're not going to bug you. But if you do it with some of the other organizations, you'll keep hearing from them every day sometimes. But you can see that early funding is really, really important. Most of these organizations are staffing up right now. They're scaling up, they're recruiting leaders, they're leveling up, they're building organizational infrastructure, they're buying time, for social media, they're, organizing their phone banks and that sort of thing. So it's really important to get money out to them right now. And then just to point out that there is sort of a way to identify likely voters that would be interested in environment and sort of target them. If you look at, it's a little hard to see all of the bar graph here, but the black bar is the one for all registered voters. And it says that 37% of them are likely to be pro-climate voters. It's a little different than the number I gave you before, but still significant. But if you look above that bar, there are certain segments of the population that are even more likely to vote with a pro-climate point of view. And one of them is Black and non-Hispanic Latino voters. That's 41%. And, some of them above that as well, Hispanic, millennials. So these are the people who are targeted by some of the organizations I'm going to tell you about now. So the purpose of an organization called Democracy, let's see, I think the next one shows you that. The organizations I'm going to tell you about now are organizations that are grassroots groups on the ground. They're people from the states, from the towns. In some cases, they're people who know their neighbors, who know their constituents, and who do some of this door knocking. So it's more likely that people are going to answer the door if they know you, for example. And these are groups that have been at it for a long time, so they have track records that can show that they've been effective. And you can see in the header at the top, their attempt is to educate people, to register them, and then to finally turn out the vote. So it says voter registration has been rising, but 30% of eligible voters are still not registered. And 47% of eligible voters did not vote in America in 2022. And that's kind of embarrassing when you think about globally. That's a very low number. So this is all about turnout. The election this year is all about getting out voters who you think are going to be sympathetic to your particular issues. So we need to get them out. So here's one organization that I really like. It's called Force Multiplier. And most of what they do is partisan, and you can visit them to find out about that. But this particular outreach is called Democracy in Action Slate, and they've identified organizations that are all nonprofit organizations, all nonpartisan. So therefore, you can give to them and get a tax deduction. And in my case, because I'm old, I have an IRA that I have to take money out from each year. So I can write a check to these organizations and I won't need to pay taxes on the amount that I take out for these particular organizations. Same for donor advised funds. You can use those for these for this slate. And so Force Multiplier takes charge of that. You can donate through that organization, Force Multiplier. And again, they don't share your names with all of these organizations, so you don't get a million emails back from them, unless you want to. You can go to their website. I just want to identify one of them that I've contributed to for quite a while. This is called the New Georgia Project. And again, you saw that Georgia was really an important state in terms of votes. So this is a nonpartisan effort to register, civically engage, and build power in the new Georgia majority, which is Black, brown, young, and historically marginalized voters in the Peach State. And not surprisingly, this is a group that was originated by Stacey Abrams, sorry, Stacey Abrams. Another really good group is called the Movement Voter Fund. And this is one, if you know Ken Karnofsky, he is very supportive of this group. Again, they support grassroots groups in particularly in battleground states, and they monitor these groups to see that they have the impact that they need to have for the donations that come into Movement Voter Fund. Movement Voter Funds also has a PAC, which is not tax deductible and is partisan. So that might be something that you would want to investigate. But tonight we're just talking about the voter fund. They had some really interesting information on their blog as well in terms of strategy for the upcoming election. I'd like to feature another one called Center for Common Ground, and they have a campaign called Reclaim Our Vote. And this is focused on Black and people of color and in key states. And they have been able to, by talking to Black voters over the phone, they've been able to increase turnout by 17%, which is huge. So this would be another population that would be really important to get out to the polls. Here are some more statistics on what they have been able to do. And this Center for the Common Ground, if you go to Fallen Church or to First Parish in Lexington, the UU, I guess their headquarters, has endorsed this group. And so they are encouraging people to contribute. This would be the main thing that you could do to support them. But all really important. You can see the states that they are dealing with as well. Really important states, swing states. The other group that is very good is called Rock the Vote. And this is focused on young people. 16 million young people have come to voting age since 2020. And so they're reaching out, and they've been able to show that they turn out young voters at 30 points higher than the national average. So they're effective as well. And I should mention also that we're going to send information out on all of these organizations. I think, Ricky, are you putting in to the chat all the links?
Yeah, I've put in everything you've spoken to.
Oh, great. Okay, good. Yeah.
So I think we know everybody here except whoever's on the iPhone. So if that person would like to get the follow-up information, just put your name and email address in the chat.
Yeah,
sorry.
We wanted to send a follow-up, so it'll be easy to have all these links in one place. And so just, some information from the Center for Common Ground in terms of the effectiveness of phone banks they're talking about. But, it really does make a difference to talk to people and make it personal and reach out. And you don't have to knock on the door. But here's the easiest one. And this is called vote tripling. And they tried this in the last election, and it was very successful. It increases voter turnout by up to 8%, which is huge. Doesn't cost anything. All you have to do is to think about all the people in your very own network. And I would advise starting with the people who live in these states, your friends, your family, who you know, people who you know. The states that were mentioned, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. You know, anybody in these states, think about who they are and then reach out to them and tell them why this upcoming election is so important, and tell them about the issues that you are really concerned about. And that really has an effect on people. So vote tripling, and then if you ask them to reach out to their friends and relatives, and of course they would reach out to people who probably would be receptive to the message, that's how the tripling takes place. So that's a really important thing that everybody can do. So this is talking about tipping the balance. We're always talking about you know, the tipping points in climate. Well, hopefully this is something that will tip the elections, that will reduce the tipping points that we're approaching in the climate. So a new analysis of polling data and computer simulation shows that though climate change isn't a voter's top issue, it has enough power to tip elections. So we saw that in the bubbles earlier. And the thing that really blew my mind was something from a post from the Movement Voter Project. And this was the analysis that said that voters who will tip this election could fit into a football field. Wow. Likely 10,000 voters in 1 to 3 states will make a difference. And we've already seen, especially with the data from the Environmental Voter Project, that that number of voters is easily obtainable if they have the support, both physically, you know, with phone calling and postcarding, but also monetary support as well. And you know, it to me anyhow, it's very, very worth pursuing, and something that, you know, if you feel anxiety, like, oh my gosh, what can we do? Here's something that you can do. And I put this one in because this is one reason why I am so adamant that I'm going to do whatever it takes. I mean, the legacy that these wonderful people in the picture, who are my daughter and her family and the dog, her legacy is going to be used in part to fund some of these voter projects, because really their future is at stake. And you know, that's my job right now, is to do everything I can to protect them and to protect our common home. I really care about this beautiful earth that we have, and I think it's our, I mean, to me, it's our moral obligation to try to do whatever we can to keep it in good shape and livable climate for future generations. So you can make phone calls, you can send postcards, you can send texts, you can donate money. And I really encourage you to join us so that we can do this together. And I'm going to end by getting out of this, and keep your fingers crossed and see if we can get into our final thing here, and share my screen again. And okay, well, avert your eyes. Okay, we're going to try this, and keep your fingers crossed to see that you're going to hear this. I'm going to undo the thing. Okay. Oop.
Fran, it's not going to full screen. Is it on your side?
Yeah, it is. Oh no. Well, can you see it at all?
Well, we see the big opening screen with the little red copy below it,
Okay.
which
Okay, well,
tells its own story.
yeah, I know. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not.
Oh, there we go.
You got it? Okay.
Yeah. But we can't hear it.
That's okay. So the question is, are you in? Or do you have any questions? Or do you have any suggestions? Because some of you, I think, are working in this area. Um,
John, you look like you have a comment?
Oh, well, I was just going to ask you, since you've been doing some of this calling, Fran,
yeah,
I think for what, Environmental Voter Project, or which one have you called for?
yeah. Well, Environmental Voter Project, but I've called for other groups too.
So what is your experience? I mean, I have rarely called, and I haven't done it for some time, but it was.
Ah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's sort of cumulative, I would say, because you don't normally get to talk to too many people. You get to talk to probably more people than you would if you were knocking doors,
Mm,
and you have direct contact with them. And especially towards the end of the election season, people are inundated, and so you get a lot of hangups and so on. So honestly, I find reading the postcards the best for me, because I feel like that's going to reach people. It's going to get into their house. They have a chance of seeing my personal message. And, it's been shown to increase, by, a small but significant amount, the number of people who get out to vote. So for me personally, that's the best thing. Now, if you do a lot of phone banking and you do it with a group, which usually you do, they tell you the next day what the stats are, how many people the whole group actually reached, and that's significant, So yeah, and I mean, I've had really interesting conversations with people about voting, and I think at least there are at least some people who voted who might not have voted before. So, you know, it it, it really depends on you and what you like to do and your time. Yeah.
I did think it was interesting that you said that one of the ways that it's done, particularly early on, is to inform the answerer who's
Mhm.
hasn't voted how to get themselves set up to vote.
Yes.
Or you
Yeah.
just can't walk up the day of the election and say, I'm here to vote. You've got to get
Oh, yeah.
registered and so
Yeah.
forth. And to give people who have some inclination toward voting that information and time, it does sound like useful.
Yeah. And I think especially now, because in so many of these states, they actually have active voter suppression because of the politics. And so because they've changed some of the regulations, it's really hard to follow. So providing that information is really important. Yeah.
So I'm assume that when you did it with that intent, the organization who was running the show
Yeah.
was you need to have the information yourself. I mean, and if
Oh,
you're
no. You're provided with a script. I mean, if
right.
people are interested, I can find the script so you could see it. But oh yeah, everything is done for you. I mean, they give you websites and they give you, well, if they say that they're going to vote on election day, here's the hours that the polls are open in your town, So they tell you everything, it's very, you don't have to, look anything up. Yeah, it's worth a try to see, if you like to do it. And I was kind of surprised because the Environmental Voter Project only wanted you for an hour and a half, and their training was like 20 minutes or 25 minutes. So, you really were only on the phone for a relatively short time, and then they have you come back at the end to kind of share your experience. So that's when you hear whether what you're finding is similar to what other people are finding. And it's interesting. It's
I
interesting.
assume that if you've done an environmental voter project calling before, then the first 20 minutes of orientation, you just get.
Yeah, you can just skip that. Yeah. And they give you all the codes. And oh, and I should have mentioned, all you need is your computer and a phone. You can do it from your house, of course. You can do it. I mean, because of the time zones, very often, at least closer to November, you can go deep, way into the night to call California, so yeah, so it's a good option. Other questions or?
Tina's got her hand raised.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Where's Tina? Oh, yeah. Hi, Tina.
Hi, friend. I'm sorry. I had my camera off because I was eating during your presentation.
Oh, that's okay.
Excellent, by the way. I really enjoyed it.
Oh.
I've done a bunch of these phone banks over the years, and it's true. Sometimes you're on for an hour and a half and you only get to talk to like 4 people. And there are other times when, you get to talk to a lot more people. And yes, some hangups. But I do have to say I really do love the scripts because it gives you options. Like if if you ask someone if they're interested in learning more about this or that, and they have all the information for you to give to people, which I would not be familiar with what's going on in Arizona, as far as how to get registered, and so it's nice to have all that information. And it made me feel very comfortable when doing this phone banking that you're using your own phone, but you're not calling them directly. You're doing it through the program. Because I remember the first time I did it, I was unsure about that. But it's fine. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks. That's I'm glad you mentioned that because these dialers that they have, they automatically dial numbers for you, so you don't even have to do that. You need your phone to get into the system and to connect your computer to their system, but after that, it's sort of automatic. So, and nobody knows what your phone number is because the call is coming from the organization. So, yeah. Other comments or suggestions?
I'll make a quick comment. I don't see any hands raised, but please, everybody raise your hands or put comments in the chat like Lisa just did. Thank you, Lisa. So my son lives in Georgia, and I'm sure some of us know people who live in battleground states. And I went down to visit him 2 years ago when Raphael Warnock was running again, and I did work for him, and I knocked on doors, and they paired me up with somebody who lived in the neighborhood, and I had knocked on doors before and she hadn't, and it was kind of, fun to work with her. But more people open their doors than I thought would open their doors, and particularly when it's close to the election, knocking on doors reminds people to vote, reminds them to get out there, and not forget about voting. So it's something, if any of you have relatives who live in another state, you maybe want to go visit them, or maybe want to work for that state just because you care about it.
Good
Like
comment.
a close important state is Pennsylvania.
Well, New Hampshire
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, I think there's a lot of organizations that will send you up to New Hampshire. Yeah. Any other?
I see Lisa's hand is up.
Yeah, Lisa.
Well,
Tell us about, yeah.
this is more partisan stuff, but I can put a number of resources in the chat, or I can share them with you, Fran. I'm part of an indivisible group here in Lexington, and actually we've been out at the farmers market signing people up who'd like to go canvass in New Hampshire. But there's another indivisible group here in Massachusetts that's based in Cambridge called Swing Blue Alliance. And they've been really focused on, they do phone banks. The phone bank I put in the chat is a different kind of phone bank. You're not calling voters, you're calling people who volunteered in the past and asking them to basically to volunteer again. Actually, what I believe they do is you're inviting them to a social event where they'll be presented with opportunities to volunteer again. So it's a fairly friendly phone bank. You're not cold calling voters, but Swing Blue Alliance, speaking of Pennsylvania, has actually rented a house in Philadelphia. And they are going to be organizing canvassing trips and also voter registration on college campuses. So I think they're beginning the canvassing later this month. And then they're particularly looking for people kind of at the end of August and maybe into early September. So I can put some of those links in I think the best thing in that case, I'll put a link to their canvassing page. And then they've got a number of places where they're doing training and then how to sign up for any of the trips in Pennsylvania.
Oh, can you mention Waterstone? Or not the, well, sometimes it is, but the postcarding, yeah.
So basically what we're doing, some people might have been familiar with Minuteman Indivisible, which was an indivisible group that was formed here in Lexington right after Trump was elected. And they've kind of gone entirely virtual and to do all out-of-state election stuff. Indivisible Lab, which is Lexington, Arlington, Bedford, and beyond, we wanted to do in-person events. We thought, now that people are more likely to get together in person, that we wanted to reconstitute a local indivisible group that did that. So we have postcard events every other Wednesday morning. In the summer, we're meeting behind the visitor center on the covered patio that, abuts the bike path. And tomorrow, we're meeting tomorrow to do postcards. And if it's really hot, we might go around the corner to Villa Lago to try to avoid the heat. But when it's not good weather to be outside, the folks at Waterstone have offered us their meeting room. So all fall and winter and early spring, we actually had meetings at Waterstone where we both did postcards and invited speakers to come in. And Fran came in and talked to us about the citizens article that she had at town meeting. We also do state level elections and advocacy. So that's actually something we're going to be working on this summer, because here in Massachusetts, it's important that we have a strong legislature and people who select good judges.
Mhm.
So that's something else that we do. So I'll put our website address in the chat.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
How,
Yeah.
Fran, do you get more postcards? I mean, I've done some, but how do you hook into the various postcard groups?
Well, the the Environmental Voter Project occasionally will have postcards. So if you go to their website,
Okay.
you can see, I think right now they just have the phone bank. But there are a couple of groups. I mean, Lisa mentioned one, and you had postcards at the farmer's market, right? Or did you have to order them ahead? I think you.
Yeah,
Had-
we were asking people to order them ahead because we're relying on someone else to put the packets together for us, but we usually get some extras.
Yes, and the postage is going up, isn't it? July
Right.
15th or something?
15.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
And the
uh,
messages order a little bit early because usually a day or so before they take the online ordering at least down while they redo all the prices.
oh, gosh. Okay. So, yeah, so there's that. And then there's another group called Band in
Mhm.
town that does postcarding to various places. So,
And Swing Blue Alliance, which like I said, is based in Cambridge, they're writing letters into Pennsylvania, and they have postcard pickup. In this case, it's letters, not postcards, but sometimes it's postcards in all of the surrounding towns. And Linda Lee, who lives over on Baskin Road, is one of the postcard pickup locations here in Lexington. And I think she's actually got, I don't know if she still has letters left, but there's a pickup there, I think, this weekend.
yeah. And I think, Ricky, didn't you say that your son lives in Georgia, and how many postcards did he get?
Well, we had a Zoom and he fanned out all his postcards that he had received. He's a consistent voter, but he thought it would be fun to hold on to all of them. And it was really interesting. They were from all over the country. And, you know, nobody changed his mind because he was
Yeah.
voting the way I thought he would vote. But he, you know, people get them. And I think, Fran, you're right. You get a postcard and it's got some either colored ink on it. You showed a picture where people used highlighters to, and if you see handwriting, and you know, I've done the grandmother's
Oh, that's great, yeah.
postcarding.
Alice Pierce, yeah, at Brookhaven, yeah.
Yeah, it's it seems to me, it seems like a way to connect with people across the country. And you know, Fran and I went over this presentation this afternoon, and she got me very excited to start getting gear.
Yeah. Oh, well, good. So, and
But, so how many postcards did he get? About?
I would say he had at least 25.
yeah, I think there was a representative on Long Island that was replacing, who was the guy that was
Oh,
left the house and
disgrace.
yeah,
Yeah,
in disgrace.
right.
Anyhow, but he did win. And he said afterwards that all of his constituents got at least 5 postcards. So it, you know, it really, you know, the effect is small, but it's significant. So, you know, and it's easy to do, I think, you know, especially if you do stickers like I do. Oh, the other thing is that they were actually able to test this. One question is, well, if you get something that's postmarked from Massachusetts, doesn't that kind of, you know, give you negative points if you're getting something in Arizona and it's from Massachusetts, you know, those people from Massachusetts. And I guess they found that it did have a slight influence on the impact on whether the person voted. And so some people actually write all their cards, get it all stamped and everything, and they send it to a friend who lives in that state so that it's coming from that state. And also, you know, on the phone bank, sometimes people will say, how come I'm getting calls from Massachusetts or whatever? Some organizations actually use phone lines that are from that state, which makes a lot of sense, but you know, it is what it is and you do what you can do.
Well, we might want to gather names and addresses of people who live in battleground states. And I'm sure if I send a package down to my son, he will throw it into the mailbox. So
Yeah, great. We'll put
So
him down as our Georgia contact.
I think somebody, Lisa, said that there was a volunteers who went around here, drove around to pick up postcards. Is that right? The unsent postcards? No?
Oh,
I'm not
well, you
sure.
said there's somebody on Baskin Road where you can drop your.
So I put a link in the chat. Linda Lee, who lives over on Baskin Road, you may know Linda, she's Charlie Lamb's wife. She's a
Oh.
postcard pickup location. So there's an organization, Swing Blue Alliance, does very large postcard campaigns. I think they're trying to send 700,000 letters to
Wow.
Pennsylvania. And
Wow.
so they work with some groups to have postcard pickup sites, mostly in the greater Boston area. So Linda does them here in Lexington. And the link I put in the chat is a link to you. Basically, you go online, you request, in this case, it's letters, not postcards, which is a little bit more expensive because you're putting a regular postcard, a regular first class stamp on it. But often with the letters, you're just writing a short message over a letter that's already printed. And it's just basically volunteers who are putting them, who are paying for the stamps, putting them together and putting them in the mail. So that was the link that I put in the chat. The other link I just put in is for an organization called Postcards to Voters. They're not nonpartisan, but they're basically, the guy who runs it is a guy called Tony the Democrat. And he first just started doing postcards with his friends when John Ossoff first tried to run for Congress, not for Senate. So they're kind of the granddaddy of postcard writers. But the nice thing about postcards to voters is you request addresses from them. You provide your own postcards and stamps. They sell postcards if you want, but you can get postcards anywhere. And they tend to they write for some of the big races, but they also write for some of the down ballot races where you're telling people about a race, like a special election. They wrote for the one in Long Island, for example, that Fran mentioned. They wrote, a lot of postcards into that race. And they also write basically all year round. When there's not a campaign, they write postcards to Florida to encourage people to sign up for vote by mail. So they've always got a postcard campaign, and you can request as few or as many addresses as you want. So the link I put in the chat explains how you sign up with them and then how you can get addresses. Used to be able to text to get addresses, and then for some reason, a lot of the carriers make it hard to do that. So you have to either email or use Slack to request addresses.
Yeah. So you mentioned the drop off piece. Are you dropping off so that they can collect those letters and send them from the state that they're going to?
So actually the way it works in this particular campaign, you have to drop them back off. So basically when you sign up for the letters for Pennsylvania that Linda has, first you sign up and you get the letters and you pay her. And then for that particular campaign, I think they actually want you to return them to Linda, and they're going to send them out all at once. But for some of the other campaigns, you're just signing up to pick up a postcard packet at her house, and then you mail the postcards.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that seems to be an easy way to influence the election.
Well, and reiterating, Fran, what you talked about, which is, so much of it is getting out the vote. I mean, to me, I agree. It's sort of disgraceful, the low voter turnout we have in this country. I mean, I knocked on one door. I forget which election this was for. It was in Lexington. And this is a little anecdotal story that I like to tell people, because I knocked on the door and it was close to an election. So it was like, I'm reminding you, and, it was an identified voter. So it was like, just reminding this person, please don't forget to vote. And she said, oh, we always vote in this family. Her dad taught them to always vote. And her dad never missed voting. And he was coming back from a business trip and his plane was late. He got to the voting place just as they were closing. He got to vote. His candidate won by 1 vote.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So once the family knew that story, and now that I'm passing it on to you, I think we all have to recognize that every vote counts. And these small percentages, I don't know how we ended up here as a country, but these small percentages are what is going to make the difference.
Yeah.
So,
and the difference is going to be huge. So that's where we started.
Yep.
And then maybe that's how we leave you with. But so I hope we were able to answer questions, and I hope everybody will join in getting out the vote.
yeah. And we will send out follow-up and all the links so you can do all this on your own and in the time that works for you. And thank you for coming.
And Ricky, in case people watch the video, can you put the LexCAN contact information in the chat? And then if people are interested, they can contact us and we can send them the follow-up as well. So, John.
I have a question, and maybe this is a little bit off the topic, and maybe if we go forward with this question, maybe this should be edited out of any video.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't we stop the video? I think we're good, and then we'll stay on and you can ask your question.
Oh,
We can
Mark,
say what we want after that. Mary.